All right, today we're going to talk about one of the most brutal and, honestly, game-changing conflicts of the 19th century, the Siege of Sevastopol. For 11 straight months, this one city became the center of a war that basically dragged the world, kicking and screaming, out of the age of Napoleonic battles and into the grim industrial warfare of the modern era.
So, what kicks off a conflict this big? Well, it really all boils down to this one pretty chilling quote from Tsar Nicholas I. He's talking about the Ottoman Empire, which everyone at the time called the sick man of Europe. It was this huge, sprawling empire that was, well, crumbling. Russia saw this as a golden opportunity to grab power and influence. But the other big players in Europe, they were determined to stop that from happening. And that created this massive geopolitical powder keg just waiting to explode.
Now, you might think this all just blew up out of nowhere, but that's not the case at all. The fight for Sevastopol was really the climax of a 100-year-long push by Russia to completely dominate the Black Sea. It was slow, it was calculated, and it put them on a direct collision course with everybody else.
And you can see just how this played out step by step. Each one of these treaties was another piece of the puzzle for Russia. First, they get access to the Straits in 1774. Then, boom, they annex Crimea itself in 92. By 1829, they pretty much control the whole coastline. So when Russia makes its next move in 1853, Britain and France basically say, okay, that's enough. They side with the Ottomans to push Russia back.
So the Allies, that's Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire, land in Crimea, and they've got this one big idea. Take Sevastopol, Russia's main naval base, and the war will be over. The plan was simple, right? Get in, get out. A quick, decisive victory.
And at first, it looked like it was going to be a cakewalk. They crushed the Russian army at the Battle of the Alma, and suddenly, the road to Sevastopol was wide open. The city's defenses on the land side were a complete joke. I mean, even the Russian vice admiral later admitted that if the Allies had just marched straight there, they would have won easily. But then, they stopped. They hesitated. And that single decision, it changed everything.
That hesitation was the best gift the Russians could have ever asked for, because it gave them time, and it gave them this guy, Edward Todleben. Now, he wasn't some fancy aristocrat, he was the son of a shopkeeper, but he was an absolute genius of military engineering. In just a few weeks, he took that weakly defended city and built a massive, sprawling network of earthworks and trenches that turned what should have been a quick assault into a grinding, year-long nightmare.
And on the other side, what was the Allied thinking? Well, this quote from their own chief engineer pretty much sums it up. They were just so overconfident. They figured, why risk an assault? Our cannons will blast the place to bits in a couple of days. They had absolutely no idea what they were up against.
And this is where the story gets really dark. Because this siege, it wasn't like a classic Napoleonic battle with cavalry charges and colorful flags. No, this was a bloody, static, industrial grind. It was a horrifying dress rehearsal for the trench warfare of World War I 60 years in the future.
A huge reason for all the carnage was brand new technology, like the Mini-A bullet. Before this, rifles weren't accurate from very far away. But this new bullet, it spun as it left the barrel, which made it incredibly accurate and lethal at distances that were just unthinkable before. And it didn't just kill you, it would shatter bone, causing these catastrophic injuries that surgeons could only fix with one tool, the saw.
But you know what? The bullets weren't even the worst part. The real enemy for the Allies turned out to be the winter. I mean, just listen to this report from a British doctor. Guys were freezing to death in their tents. Their boots were freezing solid to their feet. Storms sank their supply ships, so they had no winter clothes, no food, no medicine. The cold was every bit as deadly as a Russian cannon.
And if you really want to understand the sheer horror of this, just look at these numbers. For every one Allied soldier killed by the enemy, about 7 or 8 of them died from disease. Things like cholera and dysentery just ripped through the camps. It's staggering. Sickness killed far more men than the Russians ever did. And right in the middle of all this chaos, there's a 26-year-old Russian artillery officer who's writing everything down. And he just happens to be a future literary giant, Leo Tolstoy. His first-hand accounts captured this wild contrast, this incredible patriotic heroism and, at the same time, the disgusting, brutal reality of it all. This experience is really what made him the writer he became. So, the terrible winter finally ends. Spring comes. The Allies have regrouped, they've got fresh supplies, and now they are ready for one final overwhelming push to break this thing once and for all.
And when I say overwhelming, I mean they brought everything.
They lined up 775 heavy cannons to just pound the city into dust. I mean, just try to picture that.
In just the first 24 hours of that final bombardment, those guns fired 86,000 projectiles at the Russian defenses. 86,000.
The result? It was a nonstop, earth-shaking storm of steel. The Russians were losing over 2,000 men a day. Every single day. And somehow, they kept holding on.
The breaking point finally came on September 8th. The French launched this one last, desperate assault, and they did it. They captured the Malakoff redoubt, the one key position that held the entire defense together. Once that fell, the Russians knew it was over. That night, they abandoned the city. The siege, after 349 brutal days, was finally done.
So, the fighting stops. The Crimean War is basically over. But the impact of this siege? It was just getting started. This didn't just end a war. It shattered the old balance of power and changed the whole game in Europe.
The peace treaty that followed was a total humiliation for Russia. The Black Sea was declared neutral, no warships allowed. It was like putting a giant lock on Russia's southern front door. And losing this war, on their own turf, was a massive wake-up call. It showed them just how far behind they were, and it forced them to start making some huge, radical reforms back home.
And you know, the legacy of this war is literally cast in bronze. This memorial in London, the metal it's made from, it comes from melted down Russian cannons that were captured at Sevastopol. Think about that for a second. The very weapons of war were transformed into a monument to remember the fallen. It's just an incredibly powerful symbol of the cost of it all.
So when you boil it all down, Sevastopol was the moment war became modern. It was where new, deadly technology met old, outdated tactics. It was the terrifying first draft for the trenches of World War I. And that's the thing that really sticks with you, right? A 170-year-old siege for a port that remains contested to this day. It makes you wonder, what echoes of that bloody valley do we still hear in the conflicts of our own time?